Hello friends, 111 or 111 doesn't have to do anything with this tutorial. The three letters here, 1, 1 and 1, are all different. And this tutorial is about two commands. Detach under edit mesh. Please internalize this. Under edit mesh, detach. The second one is mesh separate. So we have separation and we have detachment. And that's what we're talking about today. So this object here, that's my starting object, the number 1. This one is absolutely the same. And this one is the same too. So they all look the same, but they're all different. One difference is, for example, this. Let's pick a random face like this one here. This one. And move it out like this. So the whole number is being distorted. Let's undo this. Right here, I want to do the same thing with this face here, and I move it out. And it just easily moves out and leaves a hole there. So the difference here is that this is not glued to the other edges here. It's separate, although it's one object. Let's go to object mode. This object here is the type mesh 2, and the previous one is the type mesh 1. But this one is different. Now let's pick the face again, this one. Same thing as before happens. It just moves out. But here in the outliner you see that this object here, the one on the right, consists of many single surfaces. For example, that one. Where is it? Over here. And that one. And that one. They're all different and separate objects. From this object to this object is an edit mesh detachment process. I detach certain edges, or all edges in my case, so they're not glued to each other, but still it's one object. And once I've done that, I can then apply mesh separate. And then they will all be separate. So I pick one of them and I move it out like this. Now let's create a different object. For example, a torus. Move the torus up. Scale it so it's bigger. Here in the attribute editor we can reduce the resolution in order to make this simulation more easy going. And maybe 10 by 8 is fine, it's still a torus. Give it a new shader. For example, a blin, which makes it a little bit shiny, and a ramp, which makes it a little bit more interesting. Now we have an object here, and in the outliner it's called P torus 1. Makes sense. So it's one object where all the edges are glued to each other. Now I unglue them, and that command is under modeling, and it's under edit mesh, and it's called detach. Detach only works when you select edges or vertices. So let's select vertices. Let's select the ones at the bottom and go to edit mesh and detach. Nothing in the outliner happens, but now when I, for example, pick that face down here and move it away, it creates a hole. It's not glued to the rest of the geometry anymore, but it's still one object. It's still the P torus 1. So this is not separate. If I would make a rigid body out of this and make it collapse with that plane here, this would be respected, but it would be one object. Let me show you this. Go to object mode, and go to FX, Fields and Solvers, and give it gravity. This object here needs to be a hard object, which is called a passive rigid body. And now we can check the collision. And you see it collides here, but it's one object which I gave gravity to. So let's undo this, several steps. Now we're back here. So one object, but not glued together anymore. These parts here are glued together. That's why it behaves like in the original state. Now I select the object and I go to back to modeling and to mesh, and I separate the unglued parts of that geometry now. So in the outliner you will see a group appearing with all the faces in that group. Here is the group. It's called P-torus group. You can open it and you have lots of surfaces here. Now, for example, this one, or that one. So they're all separate. Now what I'll do is I'll select all of them and I make all of them dynamic. Go back to FX, Fields and Solvers, and create gravity. Gravity automatically creates a rigid body, an active rigid body. So now we can run the simulation, and the bottom of our torus will disintegrate. Basically, that's what I wanted to show you. If you want an object to fall into different parts, you have to use two commands, and the two commands are edit mesh detach and then mesh separate. Have a good day.